that's kind of the point. I just want to talk about amazing stuff and hopefully bring a bunch of knowledge that other people can leverage in their lives, whether that's mindset, mental health, or, scheduling. So tell me a bit about this deep work stuff.
Yeah, so we started this maybe a year and a half or two ago. But Deep Work Thursday, and I got to shout out Curtis from our team, Curtis Redden, our VP. He has been a big champion of this. But we, try to carve out Thursdays to do as few meetings and interrupting of instant messaging and chatting. Inevitably, that happens because someone's deep work requires feedback on something. So there's always some chatter that happens, but we try to make it be a lighter touch day and intentionally like carving out space tonight, not have as many meetings. So at the beginning of today, I had really just this podcast call. I did end up on like three other calls, but they were, well, two of them were aligned with the work that I was focused on. So they were just natural conversations that helped me keep moving through some of that work. But typically my days are so stacked with meetings. I look forward to Thursdays. That's for sure.
I hear you. I mean, I was in the corporate world before I got into the world of entrepreneurship, and there's so many time wastes, meetings, and just you name it, right? And it's funny, I've really been a go with the flow guy more and more and more, especially in the last few years as I fall deeper into therapy and mindset and meditation. And so I'm literally at a salon getting a mani-pedi with my girlfriend and my buddy and his fiance or fiance to be. And my business partner Lance calls me. He's like, I don't know what to do, and my kids, and I need to take more time for my family, and he's upset. And I said, listen, man, like family first. You know our motto: family always first. And we're teammate here. You pick up slack, I pick up slack. It's a ebb and flow. And I was thinking about it over the next couple of days, and I said, well, all we have to do is figure out how to compound our time. And I did a bit of research, and I realized that you know tasks take time to get into the flow of and then come out the flow of. I think the average is about 15 minutes on both ends. So if you and I have a 1 hour meeting and then there's an hour break and then another 1 hour meeting, 30 minutes of that time between the meetings is wasted on coming out of the flow and then going back into the flow, not to mention having to get the flow going during that meeting. So I just did a bit of research and then came to the conclusion that we should just stack stuff. So now we have all our internal calls on Monday and we have all of our client calls on Thursday. And we're just going in and out of the flow with each one of the call, no gaps in between, just right into the other one. And that leaves Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday completely open for just tasking, emails, whatever. And that has
Yeah.
opened up the ability for me and Lance, my business partner, and other people to have what we call just like creation sessions. I mean, there's a different word that working sessions, where you know how you come out of a meeting and you have a bunch of takeaways? Well, we now
Yeah.
just book an hour to do the takeaways while we're having the meeting. And honestly, our productivity has just gone through the roof because instead of saying, hey, I need this by Friday, we just get on the, the horn on Tuesday and do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, having a system like a productivity system or a process to follow, when you follow it, has been a game changer for me. I love systems. I'm a big fan of having a productivity system. There's lots of them out there. I've done the David Allen getting things done system. I've done one, the full focus planner, and there's a whole system behind full focus. I got the pleasure of doing a business accelerator program for a year, several years ago. And that put me through. I had like a business coach I met with monthly. I got to go to some on site, like in person seminars, and really got a whole bunch of system and process driven tools to use. And I mean, that was a game changer. Of course, life gets busy, things happen, and you find yourself drifting. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm back into chaos. It's like, oh yeah, I got to get back to the system and actually follow it. So it's only as good as your implementation of it, I feel like. But if you can keep the discipline to stay on and commit to it, it is a game changer.
100%. I mean, I think that's such an important point, and that's the discipline that applies to everything, whether it's, work schedule, being a family man, being into fitness, whatever it is. Life will constantly knock us off every single path because life just happens. And the more tools, the more business accelerators we go to, the more we have in our arsenal, the easier it is to remember to get back on the path, or to get back on the path. Hopefully you don't have to remember to, you're just doing it, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Um, you've done a pilot podcast before, so take it easy on me today. Um, born in Toledo, Ohio, raised in Burlington, Iowa, and then I think there was a bit of moving around before you went back. Talk to me
Yeah.
about little Jimmy. How did he get into music? How did he become the man that he is today?
Yeah, the origin story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, born in Ohio, but moved to Iowa when I was just like 3 years old. Uh, Went to college here, met my wife at a local community college, and met in choir. So we met in music. But then was a fan of my favorite artist, Seldweller, who's now co-founder, owner of FiXT, and we've been working together for over 20 years. But when I started working for him, I went from fan of his to his first employee, and then his manager at the time in the early 2000s, Tyler Bacon, runs a very successful sync and publishing company out of Los Angeles named Position Music. He was managing Clay at the time, offered me a job to move from Iowa to LA. So in 2005, moved out to LA. My wife and I are in our early 20s, coming from small town Iowa out to LA. And this is pre iPhone. I think whenever I tell people about this, I'm like, 2005 was pre iPhone. So we're from small town Iowa. We don't know anything about this big, LA life. And we're trying to get around on like printed out MapQuest paper maps. And like, I mean, at one point we did get a old school Garmin that kind of helped us figure out, but Waze wasn't a thing to figure out how to get around traffic and automatically rerouted. So we only stayed in LA for a year. And I think half of that year was just sitting in traffic. Um, the traffic was just an awful experience, an hour and a half commute to get to work some days. But the business experience was fantastic. We loved, the experiences we got there, but we knew LA wasn't for us as far as building a family and staying there long term.
Mhm.
We gave it a shot. We moved out there, but then when we moved back, I knew that I wanted to stay in the business. And then that's when I, co-founded and started FiXT with Clayton
Yeah.
Seldweller. And but coming out of that experience back to Iowa, we have family here. We started a family. We got pregnant right as we were moving back with our first daughter. And we have two daughters now, and now that first one just graduated high school. We've got
Wow.
our second one is now a sophomore in high school. So we built a family here and have, parents and the grandparents and stuff are here. But yeah, Midwest life has been a slower pace than what it is out in LA. And not being in a music industry city could be, maybe a disadvantage, but we have been, using it as a strategic advantage. Like
Mhm.
I like to use what are the tools that we have? How can we use what is around us? And so we have lower cost overhead. We've been able to get warehouse space and build our online e-commerce operations and have, a 5,000 square foot facility for probably a tenth of what that would cost in LA. And we can afford the overhead because it's in Iowa.
Yeah.
And then we've been doing, video calls like this long before COVID made it popular to do Zooms. We were doing Skype calls or FaceTime, even before it was on the phone as FaceTime. There was like a Mac app FaceTime thing, going way back. So we've just built our infrastructure digitally and networked online.
That's amazing. There's a lot to unpack there. Let me just take a quick step back. So, were you a musician? You mentioned choir. Like, how did you first get into music before you discovered by happenstance that Southwell was your favorite artist?
So, I mean, I grew up being a fan of music, just as a listener, listened to, a variety of genres, but was never a great performer. I took piano lessons as a kid. I tried to get into band in like middle school, baritone, trombone, was not a good performer. Tried to get into guitar in high school and college, took like a class for college credit, but only ever got at any instrument just like very minimally okay. And I was like, I'm clearly not a performer. I didn't have natural talent playing an instrument. I was always in choir in high school and was a decent singer. Did choir in college where I met my wife. But just local choir stuff. Nothing too crazy there.
Mhm.
And then I knew I wanted to get into music further as a fan of music, and so I ended up going to a recording production school out of Ohio, called the Recording Workshop, and I was, 2002 maybe. It was like a 3 month. You move, live on site on campus in like a shared living space, and then you have classes there every day, and learned recording engineering. So I thought that was my path. Oh, I'm going to get into the music industry. I'm going to be an engineer or a producer or something. And probably similarly to performing, was not great at that, but learned the basics. And I'd say that actually did end up helping me in now working at a label. As I'm hearing music, I have an ear for, okay, is this mix good? Is the
Mhm.
production good? I'm able to pick out things, more than probably just an average listener. But we certainly still go and work with actual mixers and producers on things that are way more knowledgeable than me. But it hasn't been a skill that I was able to pick up in my path.
Yeah, I think it's really important to not necessarily excel at everything because it's, near impossible to do, but to have a cursory understanding of something so that you're better informed and then you can understand, especially if you're working with other people, what they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing. I'm by no means a great writer. I think I'm a decent writer and I spent a lot of time in university writing, but for whatever reason, I just never excelled at it. I also didn't love it, but I can edit the crap out of great writing. So Lance, who I mentioned before, he is one of the best writers I've ever been blessed to work with. And the stuff that he comes up with is just like, who are you? You should not be working with me. You should be publishing books. But I can edit like nobody's business and spot all the little mistakes and the duplicitous stuff duplicitous, that's the wrong word usage, but the duplicates and stuff like that within the
Yeah.
text. But the more you go down the path, the more you realize like maybe this is not where I'm supposed to be, and it leads you to running a label. Before we talk about music and record labels and all that fun stuff, congrats on being one of the very few who can find love and maintain a marriage. It seems like that's harder and harder to do in 2025. What's the secret? Maybe we shouldn't talk about
Ooh.
music. We should talk about love.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So we got married in 2002. So we just celebrated our 23rd wedding
That's
anniversary
crazy.
this year, and have two daughters. So I definitely consider myself fortunate that I found a great partner and that we love each other, and we're together, and we're not just dealing with each other, but we love each other and have a great marriage. So that is a blessing. That is certainly not to say that it has not had its challenges and its bumps, and uh, you know we've been through it all, so to speak, in
Uh,
23 years. But it's just been a very important piece of my life, and actually to set the stage for business and music stuff. Um, I got married very young, but that was an important piece that I felt like was foundational for me to feel like I had the base to go build a career on top of versus the other way around. I think having that in place, and we were working on it along the way, but having that as a foundation, I think allowed me to go then put myself into figuring out business versus having a hole relationally in my life that I needed to fill. And for me, that was again kind of foundational. But it's been a lot of trial and error and just being willing to work through it. Communication, a tool that we found, well into our marriage, but then has helped over, especially the last decade, improve our marriage. A lot about self awareness,
Yep.
but then understanding each other, but we got into a system called the Enneagram, which is kind of a personality profile type system. There's 9 core types of personalities, um, and figuring out what number you are and what tendencies you have, and then being able to kind of self regulate. Oh, I'm doing this pattern that I always do, but I can step back and see that and recognize what I'm doing and maybe make a different choice than just being on autopilot. But not only recognizing that about yourself, but now understanding, oh, my wife is this number and these are her patterns.
Hmm.
So uh, I can be understanding or forgiving of certain things, knowing like that's kind of how she is hardwired, and instead of getting, headbutting, like we can have a conversation about things and honestly just have a lot more grace for each other that,
Yeah.
we're all people with our own personalities trying to figure things out. But if you can be a little empathetic to that, that can go a long way.
I totally agree. I think grace, gratitude, all these things are super important in any relationship, not just a marriage, business partnership, working with an artist, which is like a marriage. They can definitely be sensitive sometimes.
Yeah.
Not that that's a bad thing.
Hmm.
What you said that really intrigued me just now was that you went into work and essentially were fulfilling yourself, right? You said didn't have a hole that you needed to fill. I'm now going into what I, assume will be my third marriage. I've had two. It took me losing the second one to realize that I'm the common denominator. I got to do work on me. And then all these aha moments of self-discovery where it ultimately it led me to realize I didn't truly love myself. And that's that hole you're talking about, right? Like it's tough to really be in a relationship if you're not secure with yourself, if you're not fulfilled, if you don't love yourself. And that could be so many different things. It's not one
Yeah.
thing. But good for you for identifying that at a young age, because I don't think a lot of people do. I think they get consumed with, you gotta finish university or college and you gotta get the job or you have to follow your passion with sports or date, like you said. And a lot of it's surface. You're missing out on something, and then relationships don't have the chance because of that. And then you combine maybe the lack of self-awareness or communication, and things are doomed.
Yeah, there's so many factors, and I don't certainly don't, not trying to pat myself on the back that I figured it all out because it was something I did. I think I had a lot of circumstances just happened to play out, and I'm fortunate. But leaning into, yes, some of that self work was certainly has been helpful, and I've always I've had a little tendency towards like the self improvement. I've always kind of been interested in trying to figure out how to be the best version of myself in my personal life and my work life. So maybe some of that tendency helped with a lot of other factors involved.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, life is complicated. Relationships are complicated, whether they're personal, business relationships. So back to the Enneagram thing has been over the last decade or so really a key component to kind of personal relationships and understanding.
Absolutely. I mean, this industry, entertainment in general, can be quite challenging. There are a lot of bad sides to this industry, and I think you're guest number 40, 41 for me with this new series. And whether it's a label executive or an artist that's new or an artist that's been around for decades, so many, if not most, if not all of the guests have some kind of open mind when it comes to mental health, self-work, physical activity, tenacity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's so necessary. And not just in this industry, in life in general. So let's continue to dive and pivot here. So president and co-founder of FiXT, VP and co-founder of Bitbot, manager for Cell Dweller, who's also a business partner, which is an interesting like question mark equation in and of itself, but then also husband and
Yeah.
father. How do you manage your time? I want to know like how do you manage your time and not only how do you manage your time, but how do you get time for yourself?
Yeah, that is a good question. Well, I mean, some of it's back to systems and processes and having a map. Like instead of just letting it all consume whatever it wants to consume, because everything's vying for attention,
Mm,
being intentional and setting a plan. So I make sure there's time for each of those buckets. And being able to walk away from one of those to go tend to the other. Um, you know, fixed Bitbot, working with Clayton. I have kind of three different work buckets there that are unique. So that is a challenge. Having, and again, I feel very fortunate at this point that we've been able to build a team, but having a team that you can rely on,
mm,
Curtis, who's VP of Fixed, has really allowed me to get out of a lot of the day to day operations of the label. And, cliche to say, but I've been able to, over the last few years, spend a lot more time working on the business than in the business. And that has been a big change for me, which did allow some time and bandwidth in there to start another venture with Clayton, which was Bitbot, a new company. And, being almost 20 years into building Fixed and then going from what we've built with all these systems and processes and staff to a new company, we've kind of found ourselves back in startup mode where there
mm,
are no systems and processes. We're literally making it up again as we go. And we're pulling from some things we've learned in our history and experience, of course. Um, but there's kind of this frenetic energy to a startup, like where we're just figuring all these new things out and trying things, and this doesn't work, but trying a next thing. So that has been a challenge to balance that energy with this established thing we're doing at Fixed. But some core pieces to my week are I have very set meetings with Clayton where we have a check-in and we're talking about, anything that we need to talk about on Fixed. We have Bitbot meetings, and then we have meetings about his career uh, with the management relationship that we have. So we make sure we make space every Tuesday and Friday. We're checking in. We're talking about what's going on. What are his needs? What are the business needs? Um, and of course, things come up, and somebody's out of town or on vacation or something. But typically, we are checking in for almost 20 years. We check in at least via text almost 5 days a week. So
mhm,
we keep that communication very high level of touch points. And then we have calls a couple times a week. And even outside of our regular scheduled calls, we still end up on more calls sometimes. So we're not in the same office, we're in different states. And the way that I think we've been able to build the level of trust and relationship is a lot of communication. Um, and I think that probably goes for, lots of the other relationships, just investing that time into the communication. But back to your original question, um, there certainly work can expand to the time allotted. So if I let myself go into the evening, I could stay busy and with the amount of ambitions that we have for the business, I could work 24/7 and never stop and never get everything done.
mhm.
So I have to just set a point at some point where it's like, I'm going home and I'm going to spend time with my wife, my kids, and have personal time. Um, and there's things to do. There's housework to do, and there's other obligations. So It is a balancing act, but I think some of that starts with your intent that you want to prioritize those things and making time for it on your calendar. I feel like what gets scheduled gets done. So if you're intentional that you're setting those points in your calendar to go do those things, that's another foundational piece for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's a balance, like you said earlier, of having tools, having tension or intention, having a schedule, but then also being able to adapt and go with the flow. Sometimes compounding activities. If I feel like I'm behind on some of the podcasts or audiobooks or the stock market, crypto, whatever it is that I'm into, then I'll try to figure out, okay, you know what? Tomorrow morning I'm gonna do a cardio day. I'll do 40 minutes on the elliptical. I'll bring my tablet or phone and I'll dive into those things so that I'm doing them at the same time. Maybe it'll be lunch and I'll be between calls. I work from home. The girlfriend's here, and I'll say, let's sit down for 30 minutes and eat together so that we connect and we have some of that time. It breaks up my work. She feels like she's getting attention. Yeah, I'm with you there. It's not easy and every day is different, but I do believe in having specific tools, and it sounds like we're using the same thing, like calendar and communication is so important to me. One of the things that I love, I'm never on my phone. My phone, I probably use, like, less than an hour a day, maybe even less than half an hour a day because every communication device that I need is on my computer. So whether it's WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram or Discord or email, everything's in front of me. That's why I always tell people, if you want to reach me, you know how to reach me. It doesn't break my flow because it's right here. I'm not stopping, picking something up, checking it. I
Yeah.
feel healthier for not being on my phone, and I just put it on silent and put it aside. Here we are. Way easier.
That that's you might have given me some ideas. Yeah, I still am on my phone way more than I'd like to be, but I did something recently, and I think again back to we have the team where I feel I can do this, but um, I certainly go through periods of letting everything get too much and realizing, okay, I got to get this back under control, back on my system. But I all of our communication with our team is in Discord. We have a Discord server for FiXT. We have a Discord server for Bitbot. So there's a lot of people in there talking about a lot of things.
Hmm.
Our artists on our record label, we also have in a Discord server where our artists have access to our staff. So in real time, they need something, they can message us, and between either myself or our team, somebody is there to respond quickly, which is a pain point that a lot of artists have with their
Yep.
labels. We hear this from artists that we court, or artists that have signed with us that have had other label experiences. One of the biggest complaints is like they can't ever get a hold of anybody at their label. So we're like, here's a Discord server just for our artists and our staff. You've got real time access and a private thread there. If you need us, we're literally an instant message away.
Yeah.
But after hours, I would find myself checking Discord and like, oh, there's all these other messages and stuff. So I recently signed out of Discord over a weekend to be like, can I go the whole weekend without looking at it on my phone? And it was so amazing. I deleted the app now and I'm like, I am not using Discord on my phone. It's only for my laptop and when I'm in office hours. And then when I'm out of the office, I'm not checking it. And our team knows if you need me now, it's not Discord. You need to text me
Yeah.
after hours. But that layer of removal has actually brought a lot more peace to my evenings and weekends.
It's funny is that when you don't look at work from 9 to 5 and you look at it as I'll just do work when I need to do work, it changes the mindset, right? So I no longer feel bad working on weekends or during the day or during the evenings because I know that I can also just say, all right, Monday my kids are off. I'm gonna take them to the park and we'll go and hang out because I already put in some hours on Sunday. I'll make up for it. I won't make you just go with the flow. I can't take credit for that phone idea. I was at a company, the last company I worked for before I went full-time entrepreneur, it was the CTO. I think he was Japanese. He had a very like Zen vibe about him, and he was on this old like brick dumb phone, and everyone used to give him the gears about like, "You're the CTO, man, of a tech company. Like, how can you be doing this?" And he very simply one day I overheard him said, I am online most of the day through my computer, through a tablet, and I use those devices for the communication with whoever it is. When I come offline, I don't wanna be connected. I wanna disconnect. I wanna enjoy my family time, nature, whatever. I have this thing to text and to call in case of emergencies. People know how to reach me, but I'm not on that. You know what I mean? And I took that wholeheartedly, especially after working at BlackBerry for 4 years. I took that to heart, and it's changed my world. I don't keep my phone in my bedroom at night, so it's not like the first thing I'm looking at or the last thing I'm looking at. Um, it I don't know, it's somehow like when you let go of the technology, it releases you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, you've inspired me to I need to take this another step further.
It's not a bad thing. But we're the same. We use Discord all the time. I have a really, I think, a unique approach to what we're doing on V13 promotions. So I've been running my site, as you know, for like 20 years. And because it's a music site and we started with rock, metal, punk, hardcore, and then expanded into all genres, I've basically been pitched by almost every publicist. And some are great, most are average, and then there's the rest of the lot. No shade to any of them, but I've seen what it takes to kind of like receive a pitch and what a good pitch is, what a not good pitch is, how they follow up, etc. And when Lance and I first started V13 Promotions, we were just going to do promotional materials, like written stuff, because we asked ourselves, what are we good at? And the answer was writing and editing. So bios, press releases, media kits. But really quickly, it turned into an artist development agency in the sense that we wanted to offer artists a one-stop shop where they could get everything from PR and marketing and branding and mental health and industry guidance and like contract review, not like legal review, but just, from a business perspective review, label services, everything, management, you name it, in one fell swoop, and have an experience where, just like a publicist, you're paying for services rendered, and when you walk away, you don't lose any IP, you don't lose any music, you don't lose any of that, but you get this whole suite of amazing things at your disposal. You have a team that you work with, and one of the most common things that these artists said was that, oh, I was just working with a publicist before, but man, I would email them and I wouldn't hear from them for a month. It was so hard to get them on the phone, communication. How do I know what they're doing or not doing? So we did the same thing as you. We set up Discord. We have a big, Discord server, one server to rule them all, where we have the different permissions and our staff have access to certain areas and management to certain areas. And then we have all of our clients. And it changed everything. They feel so good. They're like, hey, man, like I need something from you. And they know they can message me at 4 in the morning on Sunday. And as soon as I'm up, if I want to, I'll respond. And if not, I'll hit them back on Monday. It's great. Video calls, voice notes, even just silly things like memes just to shoot the shit. It's it's such a good tool.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been using Discord for a couple of years now. We used to use Skype as like there was like a way to have a little group chat thing, and I mean years ago. But Discord has been phenomenal.
So let's go into, who you are and what you're doing. You've got Bitbot, the label, and management. Is there one that you maybe identify as more you than any of the other ones, or are they all kind of 33%?
Um I would say the label is kind of the core piece now, makes up the majority of my time and attention and identity, I probably even to another extent. The only artist that I'm managing is Clayton, and he is the owner of the label, so it is a very integrated relationship.
Mhm.
Um, and it works because of all the trust and history of so many years of working together. Um, but I'm not a manager that's like I've got a roster of artists that I manage, and I'm looking for people to pitch me. Like I only manage him, and that's it. So that's really kind of a smaller piece of it. FiXT and the label operations, and we're a label and a publisher and a merch company, and we've tried to build kind of multiple revenue streams. So FiXT as a whole kind of takes the majority, and then Bitbot is this new business which is still entertainment industry, And I really kind of got involved on accident as a co-founder, and then they asked me to be VP. Um, but it's Clayton, who we obviously established I have this history with, and then another gentleman named Josh Viola, who was an author and a creative guy that we knew. We had done some previous work through FiXT and Cell Dweller. He had licensed some music. He for some projects. Clay hired him as an author to write a book for one of Clay's albums, and we had been catching up, and we all knew each other, but kind of had separate conversations and realized that he was working on some interesting things. Clay was in a spot where he was kind of looking for something else to get involved with. And kind of under my management hat, I was like, oh, maybe there's an opportunity for Clay to get involved with him on a project as just a business venture for him to have another thing to get involved with. So I just connected the dots between them, and they were like, oh, and they have a whole story on how they ended up fully deciding they were going to do a business together. And they were like, well, you put us together, so you're part of this too. And then I was like, oh, I wasn't trying to get into another company, but, they both wanted me to be involved. So a part of that journey as well.
Good for you. You sound like you and I have the same problem, which is we keep creating work for ourselves. So
Yeah, there's just dots to connect out there.
I don't disagree. It's part of the fun puzzle that is life. You were his manager before the label started, correct?
So no, actually, I was an employee for him and started doing his merchandise. I took over running his online store, shipping merchandise out, and then I moved to LA and worked for Position Music, which was the management company. Tyler was his manager at Position, and I worked at Position, so I got to be a part of some of that. And then on the side, when I would go home, I was still running his merchandise on the side. When I moved back to Iowa, we started the label together, and I was employee number one. Really, like, I didn't have aspirations of being, a label executive. It was just like, let's start this thing and we'll figure out where it goes. And as we started growing, we realized we needed other people. Um, I think really, other than helping start the company as a co-founder, I didn't have at that point, I was still very young. I didn't have a lot of experience. So I was like, we're going to probably hire people in that are going to manage me. But as we started hiring people in, they were under me. And I was like, okay, I'll figure out how to manage people and do some things. And I just kept growing as the company grew, kind of in parallel. The company had new needs, so I figured out how I could deliver on those needs. Again, just out of passion for wanting to do this and help Clay and build something, not because I went to, got a degree or anything special that said I could do this. I just was like, I'm just going to figure it out as we go along. And then probably 5, 6, 7 years into doing FiXT as a label, Clay had still been managed by Tyler in Position, but Position started going as a company, less management. They were managing a few artists, and they went more full publishing company. And their time to be a management company was kind of moving in one direction. And then I was there in Clay's day to day all day anyway. And so it was kind of a like, hey, do you just want to take over the management stuff? And I was already involved in all of those convos anyway. So it was
Right.
a smooth transition. There was a brief period where I helped him try and find another manager. And I won't name them, but they were a big manager in the industry. And as big as they were, like huge, uh, he was not happy or impressed with them, and he was like, "You're doing a better job than they were, so we'll just make this a full thing, and you can be the manager." So
Good for you. I mean, there's an important lesson in there in that, just because you have a title, just because you do something doesn't mean you're going to be necessarily good at it. I remember growing up, thinking doctors and lawyers and everyone, they're the smartest and the brightest, but that is not the case. Just because you're a doctor or lawyer, that doesn't mean you're intelligent. That also doesn't mean you're good at what you do. hard work, discipline, dedication. Sounds like you put a lot of that into it, and it just naturally created an opportunity for you. So, what two-part question? What is required of a good manager, and do all artists need a manager?
I'll start with part two first and say I don't think all artists need a manager. In fact, through the course of operating the label, we've talked with hundreds of artists over 20 years. Maybe not thousands, but hundreds and hundreds for sure. And I have seen more good potential paths for artists get ruined by bad managers, at least from my humble opinion and perspective, where managers feel like, well, I'm managing this artist, so I have to have an opinion and say something. And even if a deal made full sense, instead of just agreeing or saying, yeah, this makes sense, I feel like there's this obligation that they have to like come in and shred the agreement and be like, I'm doing something for my artist. And like, I feel like for the majority of my experience working with other managers, it's they're they're deteriorating their artist career instead of helping. Now, I've seen some great artist managers as well, and I don't know exactly what that delineation is, but I have cautioned quite a few artists, like, man, getting a manager involved is a really maybe a bigger deal than some artists realize. You have somebody representing you and your interests, having conversations, working on deals. And I've seen some of those managers kill deals before the artist ever even knew what was even on the table, and what really probably would have been a very good deal for the artist. Um, so I think you really have to vet out very deeply, like who you're letting into that inner circle,
Uh-huh.
and that you really have that trust built with a manager to represent you, and making sure that your values are aligned. Because I've seen, again, some managers that represent, some great talent, and the way they talk and the values they have, I'm like, man, if these artists knew they were talking this way when they're not present, I don't know that they would want them representing them. So making the values alignment, integrity, and yeah, just making sure whatever values you have as an artist, that you have alignment with your manager, and it's not just because on paper they represent a bunch of other bigger artists. Um, and yeah, really, I think some of that comes back to the artist to just make sure they're defining their own values and what they want to stand for and what they're looking for.
Yeah. So the other part of that question was simply a good manager. You've established that you don't think that necessarily all bands need managers. I agree. I think that, you need a team around you. You need a family. You need inner circle, to use your
Yeah,
words. It's really important because, just like you alluded earlier, with work and business, things grow, and then from there you have to outsource. Otherwise, you're just going to get buried in tasks, and you can't. What was the phrase you said? You can't focus on the business because you're doing all the busy work or the business.
yeah.
So, what is a good manager taking on for the artist? What do you do for Clayton, for example, that he would normally have to do himself?
I mean, there's certainly, a number of tasks that could be, um, but it's really being out there to represent the artist in ways that are going to, extend or improve their career, in really kind of a personal mission statement that I have in business, but I think especially applies to managers, is just adding value. Like, where can I add value? What are the opportunities, the dots that can be connected, to set this artist up for success that they wouldn't be able to otherwise? If I wasn't here, what's the difference when I am here? How can I add
Mhm.
value and bring more to it? Um, there's, yeah, I was trying to think of another example, um, and I lost my train of thought there. But
It'll come back, but I
yeah,
think adding
yeah,
value is such a good response. Like, if you're working with anyone, or frankly, if you have anyone in your life that doesn't add value to your life, you have to ask yourself, what is the reason for this? And value can be defined in any way. It could be that person makes me laugh. I enjoy having a beer with that guy because he makes me laugh and I can vent. Whatever it is, value is so important. Um, I think that this kind of segues nicely into the label. That's really what I want to focus on to, bookend the conversation. And one of the things that you guys pride yourself on, and I think why the label started in the first place was fair deals, right? Treating artists as family, doing right by the artist, which is something that I hold dear to my heart and what V13 is all about. Love and logic, family first. That is how we roll. Before we go there, though, um, mindset, mental health, staying positive. Life is tough. You mentioned leaving California and going to the Midwest. It's a little slower there. I dig that. I think that we've been conditioned for a very long time to live in chaos and seek peace on the weekends, whereas we should be living in peace and then seeking chaos. Like you live at home, you live somewhere calm, life's good, and then Friday you're like, let's go and have some fun. Not the other way around. What do you do for your balance?
You know, uh, I feel like I'm gonna have not very exciting answers. But you know, just being after I leave work, I go home. It's typically ending up like sitting on the couch with my wife and just whatever we're gonna end up doing. If we're gonna watch something, uh, if we wanna scroll TikTok on our phones by each other, but you know, being together and having just time where it's not about accomplishing something and going out and doing something, which I, have struggled with over the years to be like, okay, I need to be working on this idea and like this constant productivity thing, but making the mental decision that I can just be here and I don't have to be performing or accomplishing something and enjoying some downtime. So I'm not a huge gamer, but some casual gaming, watching TV or movie, some sports, follow a few teams, NBA, some English Premier League soccer. Um, and then, I like to play basketball. So in the winter, there's about a 5 month spread around the winter that get together with a group of guys every Wednesday night, and we play some pickup basketball.
Mhm.
So having an outlet like that, um, in we have a small little space of like just under an acre, and we live out in the country, so you know yard work, as boring as that sounds, but I pop in AirPods, and in Iowa we get all four seasons, but spring, summer, fall, I'm out there cutting my own yard, doing yard work, trimming trees. But it's kind of like being out in nature, tending to something. I'm not doing work, but I'm listening to music and or podcasts, and really able to just, enjoy doing that.
You should look up active meditation. I'm pretty sure you are doing constant active meditation. It also sounds like we've known each other for a while. It's nice to chat like in more depth here, but you have this very calm demeanor about you. You seem like your head has been like screwed on well for the majority of your life, especially with young marriage and young family. Like that, not everyone can do that. It sounds like you come home and for you it's that connection. It's the love that you share with your partner. It's enjoying the downtime, enjoying the quiet, the peace after being around loud artists all day long. And then
Yeah.
active meditation, which is great. So let's go back into the label. So multi-genre, artist-owned, independent record label. You guys do music publishing. There's a merchandise company as well. You founded this in 2006 with Clayton, and you built the company around, I guess, his music and the strengths of his projects. You got a lot of stuff going on now. What is a fair label deal, and how do you help artists avoid lopsided agreements? Because that's the premise. That's the underlying premise for all of this was kindness and for the artist by the artist.
So Yeah, the label started because of Clayton's experience and his background. And in the 90s, his first label deal was like a 92-8 split, meaning 92% to the label, 8% to him if there was a profit. And on paper, they never showed a profit. So he literally never made like a penny.
That's wild.
I think he got a small advance that he got like a piece of gear from to work as a new piece of hardware to incorporate into an album. Otherwise, he never made anything on that. And then he had a couple other label deals before starting FiXT, and they were lopsided, unfair. Um, he's got a whole story for that. But when we started FiXT, we realized there was a period of a few years where independently, just as Celdweller, he figured out how to be successful as an independent artist, and it was building multiple revenue streams. Uh, you know, early digital sales, but physical merchandise, digital online sales, and then film and TV sync licensing, publishing related income. And he realized that between having a couple of different um, a few different revenue streams, I'm getting my words mixed up.
Okay.
Um, Between those revenue streams, he was able to build something sustainable. And so when we started FiXT, we're like, okay, we want to have a fair deal. So from the get go, our business model has always been 50-50 net profit deals. And we feel like that aligns everybody. It's a shared partnership in that sense. Where our incentives are equal. We're only making money if the artist is making money because it's a profit share. So we're motivated to go generate more profit. We don't want to just shelve things and it not go anywhere.
Yeah.
And then we've had quite a few artists over the years that have come from, you know, that sounds crazy to think in the 90s, he had a 92-8 deal, but we have artists as recently as, I mean, just in the last couple of years that are coming from 82-18 deals, which isn't a whole lot better. So that is still very common. We've talked to artists in 85-15s, 82-18s. I mean, just heard of an artist the other day that had a 60-40, which is 40% to the artist. And we are, there is an economics to a certain size of investment and risk where changing some of those variables can start to make sense. Um, but as a baseline, we have always felt like this needs to be a 50-50 profit split. And uh, that has worked for us. And we have artists, since the earliest days of the label, like we're, we're sending quarterly payments out to hundreds of artists a quarter now and generating royalties for them. We believe that we need to be good stewards of this
Yeah.
catalog that we have and putting it out and generating and to help them build sustainable careers. They need cash flow. So paying on time, uh, sending statements so they know what they're getting paid for. Those are, other common things that there are labels out there. We talk to artists, they're like, I never see statements. I never get paid. Uh, we typically are not the label to give like big flashy advances. Um, you know, we're we're independently operated, so we don't have some big, VC bank sitting behind us just giving us money to throw
Yeah.
out there. So we're reinvesting what we make back in. So there's only, there's finite resources. So we have to be responsible with that. And we have staff that, we pay and we have to cover their overhead. And if we go overextend ourselves, now all of a sudden do we have all these staff that are in jeopardy of, are we going to make payroll? So
Yeah.
we've always tried to really operate the company responsibly and sustainably. But then back to the artists, we're like, well, instead of such a big advance, let's just generate profit as quickly as possible. And it's, even if it ended up being the same money, it feels better for us. And I think the artist, that they're getting like royalties versus borrowing from future royalties, which
Yeah.
is really what an advance is. And that has worked for us. We definitely try to, when we're courting artists, we want to work with artists that we're a fit for. And, some artists, we, we tend to shy away from, quote unquote rock stars. Like,
Yeah.
we want artists that we enjoy doing business with. And back to values, like, we've had artists that are super talented. In fact, we've had artists that we could have signed and worked with, but there was so much drama that we're like, this is not going to be worth it for us or our staff. And really, I think more and more about our staff now. Like, I could weather some of these relationships, but if our staff is getting berated and talked down to,
Good.
like, that's not worth it for them.
You touched on so many things there. I want to unpack it a little bit. So, like, we have our 13 V's, the 13 values that we live by. So, I think that values are super important. You've kind of answered the question, how do you set your label up to be like family? How do you treat these artists like family? You give them equal split. You treat them well. You communicate with them regularly. You make sure that you're getting into a partnership that is mutually beneficial. Because, like you said, you don't want to promise something to someone that you can't work with. It's not fair to either party. I love the topic of advances. I think that advances are, I mean, they've been around for quite a long time, but they're part of the problem. Advances are a um, financial way to screw someone, to hook them like a drug, to give them a visa, knowing that they have no idea what they're doing, and all of a sudden there's 25% interest, and before you know it, they're just paying debt for the rest of their lives, and they're not getting anything out of it. So I think advances should just be gone altogether. And you should get into relationships where there's a product and there's a team, and we can see how we can work on this together. So I'm happy to hear that you're not doing that, because I don't think that that's something that needs to be around anymore, and if it is, change the rules, man. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, if you
We,
wanna invest in something, then you have to be willing to take a loss. You can't
yeah.
just make a
We,
shitty business around it.
we do advances, but we do very conservative advances. And I mean, we don't always do advances, but we will when we feel it's appropriate. But yeah, what we don't do, and what I think is where artists get taken advantage of, to what your point is hey, here's a huge advance. So you see all the big dollar signs you're going to make right now in order for you to sign a deal that is not a good long-term deal. And so, hey, here's, 50, 60, 100 grand, or you hear, I know artists that have gotten those deals, and then they're in an 85-15 or an 82-18 deal, and it never recoups. So then they
Yeah.
never get any other profit. So we would offer much more conservative advances. So, like it's not about the advance. It's about, let's get into generating profits so that everybody's making royalties.
I mean, the advances are so shady as well in terms of how so many of them are structured, and I'm not on the label side. I'm not throwing shade at labels in general, but when you say to an artist, "Here's 100 grand, but we got to take the money out for the marketing and the promotion and the printing of the CDs, whatever it is, and we do all that, but we're going to structure it in a way where all the money you're getting back is taken off the top, but not really. And so at the end of it, just like a credit card, it's compounded interest. You still owe us $95,000."
Yeah, there's definitely there are bad actors out there in how the agreements are structured to intentionally reduce what some labels are paying through to their artists. And we have very transparent reporting. We try to make sure when we're doing agreements with artists that we're very clear on how things work.
Mhm.
And we stand by, like, we've been around for 20 years. Uh, we have a reputation to uphold. We don't, like, I hear the stories from artists about the labels they've worked with that screwed them over. Like, we don't ever want any artist saying that about us.
Yeah. Reputation's everything. I feel like with the advances too, one last point is that there's so many artists that are now expecting something, expecting to be signed, expecting to not have to do work. And what I try to tell all of these young artists is, if you're not willing to invest in yourself, how can you expect other people to be willing to invest in you? You know, I'm an entrepreneur. Sometimes I get lots of money, sometimes I get no money. My team's taken care of, and that's, what's most important. But I can't just after a couple bad months say, "Well, throw it in the towel, no one cares." I have to be willing to continue to invest in myself to get those long-term gains, and artists need to do the same thing. You can't just spend 10 grand writing and recording and getting this amazing album and then saying, "Okay, now someone else take care of everything." Because it's not even half the work. There's so much work that comes after the album's done, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you're investing in that. Why, I was gonna ask about, like, why does an artist need a label? And I think that the simple answer is because they'll get access to a team. So it's not so much that an artist doesn't need or does need a label, they need a team. And if the label is full of kind, valued people like yourself, then great. It sounds like it's a good fit, and you should definitely explore that. If one were to explore working with FiXT, how is the best way or what's the best way for them to approach the company, approach a deal? Is it still like the good old days where you just mail a CD and walk away and pray, or is there more to it?
You know, we have had different phases of how we accept submissions. Um, Typically, it's an email or a DM at this point, an artist or a manager potentially reaching out and wanting to send us a link to an EPK or a private listening link of some kind. Um, we also use a service called Label Radar. We're not actively accepting submissions on our Label Radar profile right now, although we're thinking about reopening that. But that has been a fantastic service. So if there's any labels out there that haven't heard of that, or any artists that want to find labels to submit to, if you go to Label Radar and use theirs, you can actually see labels that have signed up to accept submissions. You submit through it and it lets you know if they listened, and it lets you know if they passed or were interested. So you like have a definitive answer. They actually listened to my track and they weren't interested. Well, at least I know, versus sending an email or wherever you're going to message them and then never hearing back. And when we when we've used Label Radar, that was a way for us to very transparently let people know if we had listened or not. Um, since we're not currently like have open submissions on there, we do get stuff submitted through lots of other channels. And depending on what channel it came through, we try to respond to people and let them know, hey, thanks for submitting. This isn't a fit for us. At least give them some kind of closure. Cause I do know that's tough when you put yourself out there and you don't hear back. And it's like, well, did they listen or not?
Yeah.
So I'd rather let somebody know, hey, we did, and it's just not the right fit for us, but we wish you luck in whatever you do. I'm sure we have submissions that have made it through different places where we haven't responded. But that's why I actually do like Label Radar. So if you're officially telling people submit here, then you know if they've listened or not.
So, I mean, that seems like it's a good, channel for hitting that up. But is there a general rule in terms of like being too pushy, being not pushy enough, presenting yourself a certain way? Do they have to have a certain style or amount of like social followers?
So I definitely would say there's not any one size fits all approach. We see all different kinds of formats. I've seen a super impressive EPK that some artists had built through Canva, and had this amazing little website experience with like animations and music embedded and video. Um, so some artists go to like this extreme, super polished, produced presentation. And sometimes it's a text email with no link, just, hey, I'm interested in talking to you guys. Where do I send my stuff? And then we need to tell them, oh, we're not accepting submissions, or send us a link here. But really, just who are you? What are you doing? And some music. Uh, Before we go look at socials, we want to hear something and know, like, is this something that we're interested in, or that we might be interested in? And then looking at their social activity, however large or small it may be, is definitely secondary to the music. And then we have paths for looking at an artist that has a small following, and we might still be interested in signing a development deal where we're starting with something from zero. We've done many projects where they literally weren't even public yet. They had zero following. They submitted to us and we're like, there's something special. We're going to get on from day one and build this from the ground up. Of course, we love, and I'm sure lots of labels, you know, would love to have something that's already very established come through our door and they want to work with us. And we've had some of those experiences as well. So it's from one end of the spectrum to the other. But really it starts with the music for us. Like, does it resonate with us? And, we obviously have kind of a genre lane of things, even though we're multi-genre, there's a certain sound to FiXT. And
Mhm.
so something that's within the ballpark of what we are typically putting out. Um, but we do get some very random submissions sometimes that seem like they have nothing to do with our sound and they're still submitting. So our name is out there somewhere. So it's always fun to see what comes through the door.
I love that. So stay true to the music, make sure the music's quality, focus on that first and foremost. And whether you're far along the journey or just starting out, it doesn't matter. Just give it a shot.
Yeah.
Amazing. I want to kind of end on one thing. You actually queued me up for it. You talked about closure, right? Like I'll know if they listened or not. That's one of the hardest things that a publicist has to deal with. They are reaching out to hundreds, if not thousands, of websites and podcasters and playlisters, and they're trying to do right by this artist. And they get a lot of dead air. They got a lot of rejection. It's not an easy gig. And I don't think artists appreciate how much, effort goes into it because they just see I've spent X thousands of dollars and I've got 10 placements or 30 placements. They don't see the hours that it took to get those, and I do feel like it's getting harder now, like, the whole game has changed since COVID, and, there's a lot of websites that went under, there's all of a sudden a lot more publishers too, because everyone is at home, and now there's a lot of sites that are doing pay to play. Getting that closure, getting that work, super, important. We focus on organic. We try to tell artists that even in 2025, Google is still the biggest search engine in the world. Right? Having proper SEO, having good stuff online, not just quick hits, like quality features, interviews, premieres, news really helps with your algorithm overall. But I still get so often, well, my Spotify numbers, and it's a vanity metric. I do believe that. And I actually had a guest on recently, Tim Quirk from Zedge, and he's also a musician, but he's been around the industry for a while. And he said, look at your average revenue per user. Like, so don't think of Spotify as this moneymaker. Think of it as a marketing tool. And how do I bring people into my ecosystem and then make money off of them in whatever area it has the highest ARPU? But I still want to talk about Spotify, not necessarily Spotify, but streaming. What do you think are some of the tools to help artists organically um, raise their streaming numbers, even if it is for vanity metrics?
Well, we definitely are a firm believer in streaming as a model, and we embraced it early. And you know our philosophy is like, you got to fish where the fish are, and consumer behavior is to the streaming model. And yes, there are still people that are buying downloads on Bandcamp and buying vinyl, and yes, we're monetizing that for sure, and want to maximize that. But we fully embrace the streaming model. um, the biggest thing, again, this is going to sound, probably oversimplified, but consistency and showing up over time is going to be probably the biggest driver of growing. If you're continuing to release music and show up over time, the longer you can sustain that consistency, probably more than anything else, especially organically, just showing up and being in there. There are a lot of artists that were great artists, but they put something out and then they kind of disappeared. And so it's like, well, they're not continuing to show up and grow. So if you can just stay in the game, which, you know, there's a whole other thing to unpack how you can sustain that.
Mhm.
But the longer you can stay in, showing up consistently is going to keep things going. But for a platform like Spotify that is algorithmic, when you're feeding that algorithm more data, there's more for it to respond to. So more data in, more releases. You can organically spin up and build activity. I mean, there's certainly things that you can do to layer in advertising and some other marketing, but you can also screw up your algorithm that way too if you're
Mhm,
sending the wrong data in. So being intentional about it. I do always prefer to try and start things organically before you start cranking up an advertising component, because if you're running ads, you don't actually know, are these numbers because I'm advertising, or was this organically going to happen anyway? So you should always try and get a baseline, or even recheck your baseline sometimes and see like what is actually happening organically.
mhm.
Okay, now if we turn on some ads and marketing, what changes? But you got to be careful too, because you can send your algorithm the wrong way and associate with like the wrong artists and the wrong genres that you're actually trying to reach.
You said consistency there, which I totally agree with. I mean, social media is another great example of where you just have to be consistent. And when I started the podcast, I had been off social media for, man, like a decade probably, and 2, 3 reels a day every day for the last 4 months, and it's really showing results. And I know I have to do that probably for years, but that's, that's the game, so be it. If I take an artist, they have 12 tracks, and I say, "Listen, you need to think about your long-term marketing. You don't wanna do 3 singles and drop the album, because then what are you gonna do for the next 6 months?" Not Doesn't work for everyone, but on average, I'll tell most artists that we're working with, "Just do a song every 4 to 6 weeks. Just drip feed it." And then that gives
Yeah.
you a year of runaway, right? A year of creativity, a year to start working on new music, a year to think of other marketable moments, to use our term, that you could then put out there. Let's assume for this session that this person is releasing a song on Spotify, on DSPs once a month. What can they do between that monthly drop on Spotify to help grow their numbers organically? Is there something that I'm missing?
In between those releases, I think goes back to the social side. They could be putting out content supporting those releases, so behind the scenes content, little short form video clips, which could be any number of types of content, like almost like little music videos, but you don't even have to go film a full music video. Just film a little piece for the verse or the chorus, and especially batching content, like setting up production or lights or cameras. I mean, you can use your iPhone or whatever phone you have, but getting lots of content to post on socials, um, acoustic versions, a lyric video, just other media that is supporting and pointing back to like somebody hears that, oh, I like that song. They're hearing it first
Yeah.
on Instagram or whatever platform. If they hear it a few times, oh, I'm gonna go save that on whatever app they're listening on. Um, so just showing up, it's kind of marketing top of mind. Like, how many times does somebody have to interact with your song to go, oh, I'm gonna go like add that to
Yeah.
my playlist or save it. So that repeated exposure, and artists, do not feel like you're gonna overwhelm your audience by posting the same song multiple times. Like, go look at big accounts that are connecting, they're posting repeatedly over and over and over again. And the algorithms are not showing every post to every person. So there's probably very few people that are actually seeing every single post that you're putting out there.
This has been great. I really try to get as much information for our artists, for all artists, and I think that you've had so many really good insights here. It sounds like outward in approach, that you can't just rely on the DSPs. You have to leverage your socials. You have to leverage your fan base. You have to keep consistent and hammer out that content. And eventually it leads to an uptick in numbers. It's not like we can just do playlists or do something specific on Spotify to grow those. It'll happen naturally as a result of the other work. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is I would take a holistic view of like all these things you're doing, kind of upcycling. into something bigger than just any individual piece of that puzzle.
Mhm.
And there are certainly things you can do within Spotify. You know, artists or labels building your own playlist that you can associate what other songs you want your song sitting beside and sharing that on socials, even if you're not spending ad dollars, but telling your fans to go follow your playlist and listen to your music alongside some other artists helps build some of that algorithmic association that your music might get suggested to fans of those other artists.
That makes sense. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to you for a final thought, a final word. But before I do, given how Fix started and the love that's there, the family like environment, the trying to do right by others, the obviously horrible deal that Clayton had or deals, is Fixed the name because you're trying to fix things or because you have fixed things?
The origin of the name is from Clayton. He came up with the name when he would be editing his audio tracks, like fixing something in Pro Tools or Cubase. Um, he would just use it as instead of FIXED, oh, this has been edited or fixed. He abbreviated it to FIXT. So that's really the origin. There are certainly a lot of broken things in the industry, and we've joked, and, similar little internal comments, that maybe we're fixing something. But really, that's the origin. And yeah, as any sort of, I guess, final thought or something to share, like, I'm only here because I was passionate about music, wanted to help an artist that I believed in build more in his career and wanted to add value. And I don't think there's anything special about me. So I think anybody could do that. Whatever you're passionate about, if you want to help build somebody else's career, get involved, just put yourself out there and learn along the way. We're all capable of picking up more skills. If you set your mind to it and you're willing to put in some work, you can build your skill set, you can help others. And instead of just building something for yourself, I found myself in a great position and role because I was first trying to help somebody else. So having a service oriented mindset has also been very helpful. And that's been a great part of my journey.